Hi, I'm Liz, CEO and founder of Worth It, positive and organisational psychologist that specialises in the early prevention of mental health problems in young people using applied positive psychology coaching techniques. So we have got coming up on the 9th of February 2026, Children's Mental Health Week, something that I always produce some content for along with the theme of the year. So I'm delighted to say that the theme this year is This Is My Place, which is all about creating cultures of school belonging. Why is school belonging so important? And I think it's really hard concept for people to get their heads around because it's not tangible and it's in the atmosphere and it's the in between the things that we do, the culture and the belongingness emerges. It can be really difficult concept for people to get their head around, especially around doing things or providing activities for Children's Mental Health Week along the theme, This Is My Place. So what I'm going to do is explain why belonging is so important so you can understand what it is and the outcomes of developing belongingness to school. Especially I'm going to be speaking about adolescence and secondary school environments because they are one of the more complicated environments to cultivate belonging in, and it's more important for adolescents to feel that they belong to school, which I will go into. It's almost more easier in a primary school to develop a culture of belonging and connection. You have your class that you're in the whole time. You're usually a smaller school community. There's usually a lot more implicit wellbeing interventions through the culture and ethos of the school environment. Primary schools will often have embedded school values around relationships and friendship and connection, all which foster belonging. So it's a lot easier in a primary school and more challenging in a secondary school because your students are moving around from class to class. They're with different cohorts all the time. It's much easier for them to disconnect. So that's why I want to focus on adolescence. And also adolescence is the developmental stage where mental health problems are much more likely to occur. And if we want to focus on early intervention and prevention, we really need to be doing more proactive work during adolescence. And what I'm going to talk about is how the school environment and that culture of belonging act as a protective factor. Let's define school belonging before we begin. I have got some notes, so if I'm reading, it's because I've had to compile a lot of notes around the theory. I have taken everything I'm saying from the literature. I'm not making this up off the top of my head. I am an applied psychologist, so I am taking things from the research, from the literature, and making it accessible and tangible for the schools and organisations that I work with. I have worked with hundreds of schools around the world developing interventions and programs that support the prevention of mental health problems and the increase of well-being, flourishing and successful outcomes for schools and young people. So the literature that I've reviewed is this paper by Allen, Kern, Vela-Brotrick, Hattie and Lee Waters. What schools need to know about fostering belonging, a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is always good because it pulls together all the research and puts it into one paper and pulls all the themes together, and that's really helpful. I've looked at the Be Well study in the UK, which was in Manchester, the Isle of Wight and Hampshire, where they looked at Portsmouth and Southampton, where they looked at 40,000 young people in secondary schools in those areas and the fat and how belonging impacts those students, and also the National Children's Bureau's School Belonging Literature Review, which pulls on both those other papers. Anyway, right. So school belonging refers to the extent to which young people feel personally accepted, respected, included, and supported by others in the school environment. So it's all about how do they, as individuals, feel that they're part of that collective school community and that they are seen and heard and understood, I suppose, by the other people, and that includes teachers and peers. So any intervention that you're doing that's going to help improve the quality of the interactions between staff and young people and staff and the young people and each other is going to contribute to this culture of belonging. So I read something a while ago that said a teacher can have around 1,000 interactions a day. So if you're wanting to create a culture of school belonging and you're helping improve the quality of the relationships and interactions that people have in the school environment. So for today's video, I'm going to be focusing more on peer-to-peer support. Later on in a few weeks, I'm going to make a video about the quality interactions of staff with students using coaching as a methodology for that. But let's look at so from the literature, in the systematic review of belongingness in adolescence to school, there was 10 themes identified that influence school belonging during adolescence, and that is academic motivation, emotional stability. Obviously, we know it's a hormone time, it's a puberty time. It's natural for teenagers to not be emotionally stable. So if we are supporting them through any interventions or programs that help with their emotional regulation and their self-awareness around emotions and emotional management, emotional literacy, then we're automatically going to help them feel that they can navigate the school environment and feel that they belong there. Personal characteristics, so who they are as an individual, their strengths and how they're using their strengths to achieve at school. Parent support, peer support, which I'm going to talk about today, teacher support, gender, race and ethnicity. That's also a theme that came out of the Be Well evidence in the UK around inclusion and feeling like there's an inclusion around marginalised groups from different backgrounds or LGBTQ+. So if young people feel that they can relate and that they have an identity with a subset of peers, either because of sexual orientation, gender, race, ethnicity, religious groups, then they find that they have their cohort that they feel that they belong to, they're connected with. That's a really good indicator of school belonging. Extracurricular activities that can join in and feel part of and participate with, and environment and school safety. How safe do they feel at school, physically and emotionally and psychologically safe we're talking about, so not just like, is the building not falling down on their heads, which I know some schools in the UK, the buildings are falling down on children's heads. They're too hot in summer and they're too cold in winter, and they have to wear blazers in the summer when it's 40 degrees almost sometimes here. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. The kids are still wearing their I've been in schools in July and they're still wearing their blazer because they've got body image issues and they're trying to cover it up. Or the school rule is you have to wear your blazer and it's flipping too hot. Anyway, I've digressed slightly, but you know, are they comfortable, like literally physically comfortable, or emotionally and psychologically feeling safe and comfortable? Are all factors and themes that contribute to belonging. So what you've got to think is, what are the levers that I'm going to pull? So imagine all of those 10 things are levers, or imagine like a dashboard, or you know, like a mixing desk, and you've got all these little buttons going up and down. Which ones are the ones that you can tweak that are going to improve belonging? Some of them you might have really well balanced out, really good policies around teacher support, or you might have a really inclusive environment where young people feel that they are recognised and they have clear identity within the school environment. But you might have teacher support lower, or not much parental involvement. So automatically have an overview of those 10 areas and think about which ones can I adjust and move up, and how's that going to have a knock-on effect to the school belonging overall. Okay, so what are the benefits? Why bother? This sounds like a lot of faff, doesn't it? Oh, I can't see it. It's not something that is an obvious thing or a resource, is it? It's intangible. Therefore, people are much less likely to put effort into things they can't see. This is implicit well-being, not the explicit. Although we can explicitly teach strategies around academic achievement and attitudes to learning and positive relationships, especially if you're using coaching, but it's more implied than explicit. So benefits, academic benefits of why bother to create culture of school belonging are: children are more academically motivated to achieve at school if they feel that they belong to school. There's less absenteeism. We know attendance and absenteeism is a massive priority for schools, and in the UK and the government, the Department for Education in England. So we need to be looking at strategies that reduce absenteeism and prevent emotionally based school avoidance. Feeling that you belong to school is a pull towards school, which means that you're much more likely to go. Better completion of school, so actually finish it, don't drop out. These studies are international, so the language might not be very British or UK education, but we can relate to that. Less truancy, less school misconduct, more positive attitudes to learning, and more academic self-efficacy. I think I'm good at school. I can do well. I can achieve. What does success mean to me? That's success on my terms. I believe I can do this thing in this situation. Self-efficacy is context specific confidence. So academic self-efficacy is confidence about their academic abilities. We want young people to have confidence about their academic abilities, don't we? We want this, I mean, everything I'm talking about has a knock-on effect to emotionally based school avoidance, NEET reduction, all things that I'm interested in as a professional that specialises in prevention. And my remit in prevention is if we move young people towards flourishing, then they're much more likely to achieve better outcomes. So that's the academic benefits. And then the psychological and psychosocial benefits of improving school belonging are higher levels of happiness. They feel happier and more contented whilst they're at school. So feeling good, one of the aspects of flourishing. Psychological functioning, doing well, feeling good, functioning well is flourishing, so that they can function more psychologically more effectively. They can have more helpful thoughts, they can regulate their emotions, they can find a positive strategy to deal with the situation, they can navigate through a challenge or a setback without having a meltdown. All of that is psychological functioning. They can find a solution to a problem. They know how to self-regulate, they know how to like problem solve, all these kind of things. Adjustment, so that they can be more flexible and adaptable as learners. One thing that young people that might become absent, long-term absent, is the struggle with being flexible and going with the flow in the day-to-day. You know, during secondary school day, there's so much change all the way happening all the time. If a young person finds it hard to navigate change, they haven't got that flexibility, they're quite rigid, that's a sign that they're struggling with their mental health. Poor mental health is either too much rigidity or too much chaos, and you can oscillate between the two. And what we want to do is get kids to be in that middle. Imagine it like two riverbanks: rigidity, chaos. We want them to be able to oscillate through the two, like water running through a stream. And that if they meet a boulder along the way, they're fluid like water, they can go around it. So how is the school environment creating that safe space that is the water in the river? So is it too rigid or is it too chaotic? You tell me. Self-esteem, so they have higher self-esteem, they believe in themselves. I usually prefer the term self-worth, but this is from the literature. Self-identity, that they have a clear identity of who they are within that school environment, that they have a role and they see themselves in a positive light. Lots of young people don't. They've got a real big problem with perfectionism in girls and disengagement in boys. Less fighting, less bullying, less vandalism, because they feel connected to that school environment. Less disruptive behaviour, emotional distress, risk-taking such as substance or tobacco use, and sexualised behaviour. The most vulnerable cohort for radicalisation are adolescents, because adolescents need, and I'm talking about any kind of radicalisation, you know, county lines, the prevent agenda, misogyny, male misogyny, which is a massive thing that's going to, you know, that's coming. It's all like young people need to belong to something, and if they can't belong to something healthy and positive, they will find something else to belong to. Because it's an innate need in their development. So we need to make sure that the situations and contexts that they're in facilitate positive belonging and healthy relationships and connections. So they learn that implicitly through, it could be an extracurricular sports team that they're in, or dance or drama, or you know, Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. It doesn't matter what the thing is, as long as it's a positive, healthy thing. So it's important. Belonging at school is important for all belonging at school is important for all developmental stages, but especially important for adolescents. because of the identity formation stage that happens during adolescence. You figure out who you are and where you fit in the world, and if you need that kind of scaffolding around you to be able to navigate that and figure it out with your peers, changing peer groups, changing the way you look, your image, how you dress, are all healthy things that adolescents need to do and need to experience. Shifting social relationships. It's normal to change friends during your teenage years and figure out who you like and where you fit and all of those things. So we want to be able to help them through the development of social skills. The children that are teenagers now were young in lockdown, and they missed out on key developmental stages of communication and relationship skills development. It is having a knock-on effect in your secondary schools. I've heard it from teachers for several years now, and it's going to be a legacy for a while. The priorities and expectations that they have during adolescence, GCSEs, making these life-changing choices where their bodies are developing and their brains are developing. We need to support them with a healthy environment for them to feel safe to be able to do that. And the transition from childhood to adulthood means that they disconnect from the family unit and they disconnect from adults, and they become part of a peer group. And disconnecting from school and peers is a normal stage of adolescence, and we want to create an environment where they feel that they belong and can connect to school so that they don't disconnect. Having the healthy, positive friendship with peers is an important stage of development that happens, and for identity formation and forming of those supports. So if you can find an identity or a cohort within your school environment that you feel that you belong to when you're figuring out who you are, then amazing. Belonging correlates to identity formation and development of a positive identity. We know, because of the synaptic pruning and the brain development stage, that if we don't use it, we lose it during adolescence. So as the brain is being stripped down and rebuilt because of the neuroplasticity that's happening really intensively during adolescence, just as much as it is during infancy and toddlerhood, teenage brains are forming and they're really malleable. So if we can support them to wire in positive connections and how to have positive friendships and how to communicate and how to ask for help and how to think helpful thoughts about yourself, they get hardwired in. This is why 50% of mental health problems develop during mid-adolescence, for around the age of 14, because of the synaptic pruning phase. And if we don't use it, we lose it. But then other things get hardwired in too, that I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm never going to be able to do anything. So that gets programmed into the brain too. So if we can create environments and situations and interventions that allow young people to build those positive pathways in their brains during adolescence whilst they're at school, it's going to have a protective factor on their mental health. Belonging is made up of 1,000 tiny threads that we weave together. So how do you put your framework in place so that those threads can then be weaved over time? That's a metaphor that I've used before. If you're interested in my program, Wellbeing Ambassadors program, you can sign up for my Belonging webinar, which is on the 22nd of January. If you're watching this after the 22nd of January, you can sign up for our free Wellbeing Ambassadors webinar, which is linked below in the box below, and find out much more about our Wellbeing Ambassadors program and how that builds peer support and how that helps contribute to a culture of belonging. I hope you found that helpful.